Today's episode is a best of episode about the use of social media in academic medicine. Appearing in order on today's episode, it's Dr. Sapna Kudchadkar, it's Dr. Mahadevappa Mahesh, and it's Dr. Peggy Semingson. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Super informative on the use of social media in academic medicine.
One of the first slides I present whenever I talk about this is, whether we appreciate it or not, or have the insight to say this, we all live in bubbles, right? So I had to acknowledge I was in a Johns Hopkins medicine institutional bubble. I'm in an academia bubble. I'm in my peds critical care bubble, my peds anesthesia bubble. And so it's really hard to get any information into those bubbles if you're not actively trying, actively working on it. At the same time, all of us within these bubbles, we're not interacting with the people in the other bubbles that could have a potential contribution to what we're doing, including all of those colleagues in community PICUs out there taking care of kids, just like I am. But we don't have an interface necessarily. What this has done is created an immediate interface for all of us to really feel like we're not alone in this. So right now, we're all talking actively about what we're dealing with in PICUs across the world, right? What is Australia seeing? And as we know, everything moved, right? From Australia through to Europe to us, we're learning about it instantaneously. So we can prepare. Start by following those thought leaders, start by following organizations and journals, because those are the three that, it's hard to get dangerous with those because you trust them to begin with, right? And then see what comes out of it, and then see how people respond to the things that these thought leaders, organizations, and journals are putting out there. And then you will start to see organically how you can potentially start not just observing, but contributing. And it'll happen organically. There are many, many people out there, probably more than not, what I call lurkers. And being a lurker is not a bad thing. So I have many people come to me at conferences and say, I follow you on Twitter. I've never tweeted anything, but thank you for all the content you put out there. And so you don't know it's making a difference, but there are people out there listening, even if they are not engaging back with you. And I think from people who are those observers who have taken that plunge, they appreciate being in the know. They appreciate waking up in the morning and knowing that JAMA had a big article that came out that's controversial, or, knowing that there's this huge surge over here. It's kind of getting it all at once, not having to sit in front of a television or in front of your computer screen for hours upon hours trying to put it all together.
Sapna, this is just so amazing. Can you talk a little bit about the professional, the ethics, and you've mentioned this phrase, drowning out misinformation. How do you assure or monitor, boundaries of you talked a bit about, the trusted sources of information, and earlier you talked about this phrase of infodemic. How do you address through your social media topics that are divisive and the misinformation out there? Do you attack that head on, or do we kind of skirt that politely? What are the rules of operation in the Twitter sphere?
It's a very, very important topic for discussion. So obviously there's a lot of great things about professional social media, but there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And I think many of our pediatrician colleagues have experienced this when they talk about the importance of masking in children. And there are people who may come after you, and what we call affectionately the trolls, the people who are going to say things, be disrespectful. I think that the key, and what I always encourage folks on social media, whether they've been on for just a few minutes or they've been doing this for years, be on social media the way you would be in person. Don't say anything on social media that you wouldn't be willing to say in person, and to say publicly in a group forum. That I think is the best first rule from a professional perspective, because this is your persona. This is you out there. And, everyone understands that if you're out on social media, that's something that someone could pull up in a Google search, for example. So you never want to say anything that you would regret later. And it's my last point on every talk is always remember that a tweet lasts a lifetime. You're always welcome to delete something if you're like, oh, wait a second, I shouldn't have said that. But it's out there, regardless of whether you deleted it. And so that's the first step. The second step is, since we're talking about this on a, podcast, and I'm from the School of Medicine, I have to mention that it's, especially in the pandemic, we've noticed that there's a lot of people putting stuff out there about patient stories, things that they've seen. And it's very important, first and foremost, to always protect privacy of patients and families. So unless you've obtained explicit permission from both the families, patients, and also from your institution to share this information on social media, be very careful. Not even sharing dates, times, gender, any identifying information can tell someone immediately what you're talking about or who you're talking about. So stay away from those. Stay focused on sharing good information in a world of misinformation.
So I like that. Let's always share good news.
Exactly. So I personally have made a decision not to engage with the negative information, with the people who are out there, because if I amplify that and say something, I'm just amplifying it. I'm just putting it out there to all my followers. And then that could potentially increase the bandwidth of that message that I potentially think is harmful. So instead, I think as scientists, as clinicians, as advocates for health, we need to be out there putting out good information, sharing what we think is best, not being divisive, but just saying, this is my perspective and I want to put it out there, and celebrating when people put out messages that are good as well. So I amplify as much as possible when someone is sharing something that I think will benefit the people that I'm most passionate about protecting. And in my case, children for sure.
First thing is like they're worried about social media. Right. It's too much distraction. It can take away too much time, and it can also lead to like all this negative exposure, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
The good thing about Twitter is you can actually allow yourself how much to engage or not to engage. For example, if I had tweeted something and I get a lot of, somebody trying to troll. Troll means like somebody trying to reply back and trying to engage you in a negative conversation.
Okay.
You can simply shut it off by either muting that person or blocking the person from ever tweeting you or reaching you. Or you can simply not engage the person in the reverse conversation.
Yeah.
So another thing is like one of the strongest thing which I use on Twitter is for advocacy.
Advocacy. Right.
Advocacy.
Forgot really, about that. Sure.
And that has become really powerful tool. I'm not going to go into the details of the politics of. Let me give you one example. Right now, the CMS, the Medicare Services, has proposed some major cuts for radiology reimbursement in our field. So the American College of Radiology, where I sit on the board, have now trying to reach out to their members to call their congressmen to express that why that can hurt the imaging world.
Sure.
That's one way. The other way is like the American College of Radiology also has sent up tweet beats with the links there where you can click the link. It will directly take you to a page where you can sign off your name and send it to the congressman. And that I like to tweet it or retweet it. And now the ACR, the American College of Radiology, has engaged a couple of super users such as us to help them in advocating or promoting this advocacy, to reach out to the maximum number of people so that all of them, at least some percentage of them, will respond to these tweets or emails and call their congressman. And again, that life is made easy. All they have to do is click, it will go to another web page with all the letters already written. They have to sign off their name and it will go to the congressman.
Wow.
And what I have seen in the past is like the more number of replies and messages they get from their constituents, more higher the chances the congressmen or the senators will respond to that particular aspect.
Wow. Yeah. Another good benefit, advocacy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for example, we in the scientists, we do so much for funding. And always there is a jeopardy for a funding, and especially at the annual budget time, Congress always have a sharp knife for cutting off the budget.
Right.
So one way is like, as you all know, all the societies will write emails to the signed off by a variety of societies and send them. But more than that, this advocacy from the Twitter world, tweeting and directly sending them about this can jeopardize my research. It can jeopardize the country's standing in future. All those things can really need to be heard by the senators, the congressmen. And the only way is like more number of people have to do it. And I find that to be done easily with a Twitter.
All right. You've definitely sold me, Mahesh. Love it. So can you go back to the micro learning also, the short learning? I want to hear more.
Yeah. So I learned about this in a random offhand remark when I was standing in a buffet. But micro learning has been around for a little while, and it's really been picked up in the corporate sector. I think because people are just so busy, but then we're all busy now. And so it's just this idea of kind of taking your competencies or your sort of smallest objectives in your course, and then creating content or finding content that goes with those competencies. But it's hard to find micro learning. It's a lot of learning is long, but so an example is like a 2-minute podcast and a 2-question quiz.
What?
Yeah. So just build it into your contents, but you might have a series of those micro podcasts. So I used to teach teachers, and let's say I'm teaching, how to learn to read. And so I might have a micro podcast on phonics and then one on vocabulary, just giving them the basics of it before we jump in. So it's just little bite-sized bits of content. Usually we think of audio and video, but it could also just be anything, a short segment of text that you send through email. I mean, it just varies.
Or Instagram. Now you're reminding me of
exactly.
Yeah, we talked about snippets on year 2 of the podcast. We called it the year of the snippet, and
I love it.
Kind of the same thing that one of our colleagues came up with years ago at one of our professional conferences for the group on faculty affairs, and she talked about snippets being like 10-minute blocks, but I like this 2 minutes is, I think, Peggy, you've nailed it. That'd be perfect if faculty could go through a library of content and just highlight or asterisk or star this. I want to learn about, say, negotiation or communicating or mediating conflict. And they could just kind of bang, 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 listen to a couple quick 2-minute things to refresh their memory about what should I do as I enter this meeting where there's a conflict between a postdoc and a faculty member. What are some of the basic principles that I should adhere to or not do? I think that's awesome. Love it.
Yeah. I've loved it too. And it's easy to create. You can just do it on your phone.
On your phone? What do you mean?
Yeah. So I pull up the voice memo app. I have an iPhone. And so I just pull it up and make a podcast and send it to myself. And then I put it on SoundCloud or whatever platform you use. So it can just be almost spontaneous, or just go in your closet and you load, minimalist technology. So
like into your closet. Okay, faculty members, are we hearing this? Just step into a closet, step into the restroom, step into your car on the way home.
Why not?
One of my colleagues, Dave Usum, talks about he would dictate his writing for like scholarly papers on the way home. He'd just say, he'd start talking, the literature shows that da-da-da-da-da-da, whereas we know this, we don't know that. And in this paper, he would just start dictating that. And then when he would go home, he'd have the basics, the shell of a paper. So what you're saying, Peggy, is that's brilliant. The same thing as you're going home and something off the top of your head that you just learned or taught today, you can do those soundbite 2-minute chunks or just talk, pause. And then by the time you get home, you got a 20-minute series that you could chop up into little nuggets. Oh, I love it. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. The mission of the Faculty Factory is to build and support a community of leaders in faculty development who share tools, resources, wisdom, and encouragement in service to our faculty members, schools, and institutions. We encourage you to go to facultyfactory.org to find out more. Get in touch with me, ask me any questions. Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast. Thanks for tuning in to Faculty Factory Podcast. We'll see you next time. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine Office of Faculty. For more information, visit facultyfactory.org.